exciting. The next frameworks and institutional adoption. The financial system, folks, is being rebuilt in real time. And the question is no longer if the transformation is happening, it is who is going to lead it. And we have one of those leaders in the house for our next panel. Please welcome the Chief Executive Officer of Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse. And he'll be joined by our very own former mayor of the city of Miami, President and Board Director of Emerge Americas, Francis Suarez. Big round of applause for that.
Great to be with you. I mean, amazing. Miami continues to attract entrepreneurs and capital, and Emerge is evidence of that.
Yes, and you know, I don't know whether it's like Miami 1.0 or Miami 2.0 where we met, but it was early on. I think there's these waves, right? I think it was early in what I call 2.0.
Yep.
When we met, pretty early on, and we've been friends ever since. You've been so gracious to be so supportive of all the products that I get, all the crazy stuff, you know, putting my hand in the fire type stuff that I get into. So thank you for that. But let's start with contextualizing the moment. I think it's fair to say that we are in a bit of a bear market in crypto. There's a lot going on in the world, right? The world is as complex a place as it's ever been, both on the technology disruption side and on the conflict side.
For sure.
What's your take on why there's a bear market and how it's affecting all the different technologies in the cryptocurrency space?
So look, I'll start just by saying I think there's no question we're in a bear market. You know, I've been in crypto for basically a dozen years, and you know, one of the nice things, if you've been through it a few times, you kind of you tune out some of the short-term noise in favor of a long-term macro view. And you know, the first real consequential bear market was kind of 2017, 2018. The peak to trough on the price of Bitcoin, which is a good proxy for the whole market, was down 90%. The next big bear market, kind of 3 or 4 years later, came along, and the peak to trough was about 70%. And this time the peak to, well, we don't know if we're at the trough, but I'm being more optimistic, is, you know, call it 50 to 55%, let's say. And I think it's indicative of the macro direction of travel. The technology is becoming more mature, the asset class is becoming more mature, the participants are becoming more mature.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the shocking things to me about this bear market is, in my dozen years in crypto, this is as good as it's ever been.
Yeah.
In terms of regulation, in terms of institutional engagement, in terms of, you know, new products coming out that are actually giving access to new segments of investors. I mean, you know, the Morgan Stanley launched a Bitcoin ETF. It's the most successful ETF launch they've ever had. So, you know, I look at these macro facts. I look at the fact that inflation is still a problem. I look at global uncertainty, and you know, do you want to hold some of these other currencies? You know, the U.S. dollar is amongst the best in the world, and it still has some inflation challenges.
Of course.
Holding assets that are non-inflationary is kind of compelling in those environments. So, you know, again, zooming way out, I'm incredibly optimistic about the next year. And you know, we have been in a bear market, but if you look at these cycles, I think, you know, we're due for coming out of this one.
Yeah, and it's all relative. I mean, I remember when I was the first elected official to get paid in Bitcoin, and I thought...
I remember that you were the first people I remember that did that. You're like, I will take my salary.
I took my salary for a year and a half, and the cost average purchasing price was about $30,000. So I'm still like 100% in the money. My residents literally paid me double for a year and a halk of work.
You should tell them all thank you.
Thank you guys. and thank you for letting me take the risk, right? And we actually made it available to all of our employees, right? So we were using at the time Strike, Jack Mahler's company, that we're gonna give people an opportunity to get through ACH, you know, direct. And so I think it's all relative. You know, I think, you know, there's obviously moments when times are better. It depends on when you got in, when you're getting out. There's this like expectation that crypto or Bitcoin or whatever is only going to go up all the time.
Right.
And no asset ever performs that way. It's gone up by 70% a year for like 10 years, or something like that. And so it's performed extremely well, but you have to be realistic about some of its performance. Let's pivot a little bit to Ripple and XRP. You're the CEO now of Ripple for a decade, right?
Yeah.
Basically. And I remember when I first heard about this, I didn't really understand the difference between Ripple and XRP. Like, what was the difference? And for audience members, they may still not understand, right? Like, you have these two great brands. Ripple's a great brand. XRP is a very well-known and great brand. What's the difference? How do they interact, and how do they solve problems?
Great. So Ripple, the company, came about 6 months after XRP was created. So the earliest days of the XRP ledger and the existence of XRP as an asset were some engineers who had worked on their core Bitcoin engineers were like, look, Bitcoin's great, but it's going to have some limitations as it relates to payments, as it relates to scaling into high volumes. So whenever Bitcoin is having a lot of activity, because of the nature of proof of work, where you're mining, we talked about mining, I think, earlier on this stage, and there's limitations to how quickly you can enable a transaction. Hash rate. So the more transactions.
Oh, look these terms up, guys. That's what ChatGPT's for. If you don't know them already, but you probably do.
But so the earliest days of XRP were, we think Bitcoin's not going to solve a payments problem because of its slowness and it's expensive. It'll be great for digital gold and what have you, but let's build a different kind of mousetrap that can solve the payments problem. And so every XRP transaction settles in 3 to 5 seconds.
That's crazy.
And it's extremely inexpensive, so fractions of a penny to settle a transaction. Now, what the early guys who were working on the XRP ledger said, look, if we want XRP to be successful, having participants in the ecosystem, having companies investing in and working on is good for XRP. And so one of those guys went from having helped start XRP to launching Ripple. And Ripple has today about 39% of all XRP is on our balance sheet.
Gotcha.
We care deeply about the health and about the environment around XRP. We want it to be very vibrant. We want lots of other entrepreneurs working on it. We want to see a lot of activity, because ultimately, if XRP is the most trusted, the most useful, and the most liquid, the price will reflect that.
And Ripple will benefit.
And so I often read, many of you in the room, I'm sure know, crypto Twitter is a very active community.
Oh yeah, I know all about that.
Yeah. And people say stuff that like, Ripple doesn't care about XRP. Why? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're the biggest holder of XRP.
We own more XRP than anybody else. I care more about XRP than anybody.
Right.
And so I always talk about, like, XRP's our North Star.
Right.
But Ripple, the company, builds products around XRP. We use XRP in our technology stack. We use the XRP ledger, and we build products around payments. So we do cross-border payments. We can talk more about, like, historically, to send money overseas took days.
Swift. Which is anything but Swift.
It is an oxymoron.
Change the name. You know, like Elon has on the driverless car, I don't know how many of you guys seen this on FSD, Sloth. It should go from Swift to Sloth.
So there is an opportunity. Like any technology evolution, Swift was built 50 years ago. And by the way, for its age,
at the time it was fast. Yeah.
It was revolutionary. It got banks around the world to interconnect and settle transactions. But in the age of the internet, where you literally can stream video from the space station, why is it that it takes 3 to 5 days to send my money, and it's expensive?
Yeah.
And I think particularly for communities that engage in remittances to, for example, here in Miami, you have a lot of immigrant communities sending money home to South America. They're paying 10% of what they're sending for fees to send the money.
Crazy.
It's totally crazy, and it's not reflective of the internet, right? You can send an email to anybody in the world instantly for free, and when you really boil it down, the email's ones and zeros.
It's a great analogy.
So is money. Money's ones and zeros. And so why can't we actually enable it? And so Ripple's whole goal from the beginning has been to enable an internet of value. Let value move the way information moves today, and we're making a ton of progress. I give you other examples, but
I know, and we're going to delve into that. So, and kind of that's where I was going to go anyways, which is, you started this project a decade ago or more, and you started obviously from the beginning. And how has this institutionalized? In other words, these products that you're making, I presume, are to allow these rails to foster more and more commerce among more and more sophisticated parties. How has that process sort of evolved
Yeah.
in your career?
So I think it's a key question, and Ripple made a little bit of a contrarian bet early on where a lot of the crypto community were kind of anti-bank.
Sure.
We're against the banks, we're going to build a better banking
And
system.
vice versa.
Ripple kind of took the approach of, if we want the most consumers to benefit, banks are the distribution mechanism.
Sure.
Well, everybody is,
As an accountant.
not everybody, but most people
A lot
have
of
an
people have
account.
accounts, yeah.
Right. So if we can enable the banks, we can unlock that speed and that low cost in a way that otherwise signing people up individually, going direct to consumer would be much harder.
Yeah.
So now on the other hand, selling into banks is very hard. They're risk averse,
Sure.
they're slow.
How do you understand these techniques?
In the United States, basically speaking, when you were getting paid by the
Yeah.
citizens of Miami Beach, you got paid once every 2 weeks.
That's right.
Have you ever thought, why do we get paid once every 2 weeks?
Great question.
Friction, payment friction. And so it used to be back, writing payroll checks took time and it was expensive.
Yeah,
and
why
was
do it
hard.
all the time?
Why do it all the
every day?
time? Let's do it
It's not efficient.
Correct. Okay, so now think about the systems that have been built up because we pay people every 2 weeks. Well, your mortgage is once a month.
Right.
Your credit card is once a month.
Yeah.
What if you got paid every day?
Right.
And now what if you paid a little bit of your mortgage every day?
Less interest.
Less interest, and that's good for society,
Right.
right? Like, there's the number of people, I mean, even these whole payday loans where you get your pay, it's like,
Of course.
if friction around payments went to zero,
You're making money on friction, baby.
yeah, that's right. And so people forget that you get paid once every 2 weeks because of payment friction.
Right.
We're so used to it in the United States, it's like it's no big deal. Like, well, of course, I know I get paid every 2 weeks. Uber did a test with their drivers where they paid them less to pay them every day through ACH.
And they were happy.
The drivers were happier, they stayed longer, and actually Uber's happy because they're actually taking some of that value. Now, my attitude is we should be able to unlock that for everybody, for the economy. And then you should be able to opt into, I'm gonna pay my mortgage every day. I'm gonna pay a little bit every day instead of once a month. I'm gonna pay less interest. I'm gonna pay down my mortgage faster. That's great. Like, unlocking that friction is actually good for the global economy.
And I would say that's probably a function of just better technological resources, right? I mean, the technology allows you to be more efficient. It allows you to be more transparent. The blockchain obviously allows you to have accountability. I read somewhere that you guys are now working with like central banks or with, sort of institutions that, like you said, may have been resistant at some time to the crypto community. How's that going?
We no longer are doing that. We did some tests with a handful of central
That's
banks
super
around the
cool,
world.
like that they would even do a test, right?
But look, I think central banks around the world, what really happened, which I think you can appreciate, is the Chinese government announced they were testing out a central bank digital currency, the digital yuan.
Yeah.
And I think all of a sudden other central banks got FOMO. They're like, wait a minute, if the Chinese are doing that, we need to look at this. And so Ripple partnered with, I think, around 12 to 14 different central banks around the world, some small economies, some big economies. And it was really just, hey, let's test, let's see, well, what could this look like? The reality is, I'm not sure every country needs a central bank digital currency.
I'm not a huge fan of it, but
I just don't know that's going to be Ripple's core business. And so we kind of sold some of that business to what effectively is more of a consulting. If you think if you're doing that for a central bank, you're almost just a consultant to the central bank, whether Accenture or IBM.
Yeah.
And that's not our business. So we kind of moved on, just focusing on what we think we are good at.
yeah, I think I struggle a lot with this concept of stable coins and central bank coins, because part of the whole issue is even in bank accounts, it's segregated from the government knowing what you have. You obviously have an obligation to disclose on an annual basis what your income is, pay taxes, et cetera, et cetera. We know that, and that there's a process for that. But they don't really know every day where you have your money, where the money is. I think that's going to create some interesting, robust debates over how fiat versus the crypto world sort of interacts.
Yeah.
What's your feeling about sort of? I like to use the word confidence. In other words, I think one of the things about crypto is it instills confidence.
Something's flying around over here.
It's like a Chinese spy. Maybe that's like a texting from.
That's one of the drones from out there.
It's one of the micro drones. What's your feeling on how crypto has captivated confidence out of consumers? Alliteration here.
Well, look, I mean, I very much, in my personal politics, like, empowering the individual to me resonates, right? And I was debanked during some of the crypto
I
dynamics.
interviewed Trump yesterday who was saying the exact same story.
And look, when your bank calls you up, one particular bank that debanked me, I've been with them for 20 plus years. I get a call on a Tuesday.
What a loyal.
And they say you have 3 days to move your money. Which, by the way, like I have other shit to do. Like, I got to worry about, okay, I got to sign up a new bank. And so I do think one of the individual, I self-custody my own crypto to some degree, and
We don't need to know where exactly.
Thank you. And I think this is important, whether you are, whatever industry you are in, having empowerment of your own money and your own financials. And look, there's some amazing stories. There's an organization called the National Cryptocurrency Association. And they kind of interview people all over the country and how they're using crypto, from cattle farmers in Texas to a divorced woman who was getting divorced, and the only resources she had during her divorce was access to her crypto.
Wow.
These are powerful stories that we want to be able to empower people in that way.
They call them Andy Hernandez stories.
By the way, Andy Hernandez is an example of a guy who is, this is a guy who's a hairstylist who...
That's my hair, guys. Okay,
he's a fabulous guy.
Fabulous.
Like, he's sending money back home, and he's exactly the kind of guy you don't want penalized with a 10% fee because he's sending money back to fill-in-blank country.
Absolutely. So I know you suffered a lot during the last administration's regulation by enforcement policies, right? I think it was, so disastrous, so anti-American, so anti-innovation. So many good people like yourself and others were subjected to the worst kind of treatment, having to spend, I don't know how much money on lawyers and have to go through hell.
It was 150 million.
Okay, 150 million.
It's real money.
No biggie, right? As much as I don't want you to have to relive that per se on stage, tell us a little bit about.
Are you my therapist today?
Why don't you just lay back a little bit as we speak? The tissues are back here, okay? Obviously, you don't get that money back, and you have to go through that. What was it like? Was it worth it? Did you think there were some victories? Let's try to go positive on this.
Yeah.
What were the takeaways, the good takeaways from this? And clearly, this administration has pivoted in a good way, right? To try to be proactive and try to get.
Did under the Biden administration declare war on crypto.
Basically.
And actually, Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, called it that. She said, we are raising an anti-crypto army. And I don't even understand that.
It's a paragon of intellectual rigor.
It's just sort of like, why do you attack a technology? You can say, I don't like how crypto's used, or I don't like how...
people, one person, whatever.
Enough. Like, to attack a technology, I just find really weird to begin with. And of course, it had the unintended consequence of just moving things offshore where they're less regular.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, and FTX to some degree is an example of that. You drive it offshore, it has less oversight, you have bad outcomes. So I think what they were doing made no sense. Now, on top of that, and I think it was really important that Ripple stood up not just for Ripple, but for the industry.
Sure.
And there's kind of like, at some point, you have to have a firewall that says if this industry is going to survive in the United States, somebody has to stand up. Gensler, who's the chairman of the United States.
He's got deep pockets.
What's that?
Well, he's got deep pockets.
Yes. The bully has deep pockets, but honestly, one of the biggest strategic mistakes the attack on crypto made was they attacked Ripple.
Yeah.
There were much weaker candidates to go after. And the other irony, of course, is we were aggressively trying to be pro-bank, pro-government, and then they attack us. So, look, it was 4 years of my life on that.
And all the technology.